You're 48 hours from freedom after 8 years in prison. 8 years holding on to one person who promised to wait. The woman who wrote every week, drove 3 hours every Sunday, who said, "I'm yours always." Then, the night before your parole hearing, you walk into a room and see her on her knees in front of the man who controls your freedom. 2 gunshots, 2 bodies, and a story that will shake you to your core. This is what happened. This is the story of James Mitchell, 34, an inmate at Crosswater Correctional in rural Pennsylvania. 8 years ago, a bar fight went too far. A man didn't get back up. Manslaughter. But James wasn't alone. Rachel Porter, his high school sweetheart, married him 2 weeks before sentencing. She became his lifeline. Then there's Warden Donald Hayes, 22 years in corrections, a man whose word could make or break an inmate's future. 3 people, 1 prison, 1 night ending with 2 dead and murder charges that would dominate headlines. What really happened on March 14th? Was it passion or calculation? What secrets hid in Rachel's letters, her phone calls, her visits? To understand how a man hours from freedom threw it all away, we need to go back. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. James grew up outside Pittsburgh, youngest of 3 boys, raised by a single mother working double shifts at a diner. Not a troublemaker. Football player, decent grades, worked at his uncle's auto shop. Met Rachel at 16, fell hard. That couple everyone expected to make it. Proposed at 23 in his mother's diner parking lot. She said yes immediately. 3 months after their wedding, a drunk at a bar said things about Rachel no husband should hear. Words became shoves, shoves became fists. James's final punch sent the man's head into the bar edge. Michael Torres, 32, father of 2, died in the ambulance. 8 to 15 years. Rachel was in court when they read the verdict. She didn't cry, just whispered, "I'll be here when you get out." For 8 years she kept that promise. Every Sunday, 3 hours each way. Never missed a visit. 2 jobs to keep money in his commissary. Letters filled boxes in his cell. James became a model inmate, took classes, stayed out of trouble, eyes on the calendar. His cellmate said James talked about Rachel daily, kept her photo by his bunk, stared at it before bed like a prayer. But around year 6, things shifted. Rachel's letters got shorter. She seemed distracted during visits, smile not reaching her eyes. James noticed, but she always had explanations. Tired, stressed, missing him. He believed her because what choice did he have? What James didn't know was Rachel had befriended Warden Hayes, 20 years older, widower of 3 years. Started innocently, help with parole process, coffee after visits, then dinners at distant restaurants. 8 months before the parole hearing, they were involved. Rachel rationalized it, told herself she was doing it for James, that Hayes promised to help with parole. 3 weeks before the hearing, Rachel snapped at James during a phone call for the first time in 8 years. That's when he knew something was wrong. The night before his parole hearing, James couldn't sleep. At 11 p.m., Officer Simmons came to his cell. Warden Hayes wanted to see him. Unusual timing, but you don't argue when your parole hearing is in 12 hours. At the administration building, Simmons removed the handcuffs, strange, and left James in the outer office. The inner office door was closed, but James heard voices. A woman's voice, breathless. A man's voice, commanding. His heart pounded. He recognized that voice. Rachel. He pushed the door open. What he saw would be described in countless reports, but no description could capture what it felt like. Rachel on her knees in front of Warden Hayes. Her guilty shock, the warden scrambling. Time slowed. James felt disbelief first, desperate hope he was misunderstanding. Then Rachel started crying, saying his name, and reality crashed over him. Hayes spoke first, told James to get out. This didn't concern him. That broke something in James. He asked Rachel how long. She couldn't answer, couldn't look at him. Hayes stepped between them, threatened consequences, and James saw the gun on the desk. His body moved before his brain caught up. He grabbed it. Everything shifted. James later testified he just wanted answers, wanted to know if she'd ever really loved him. Rachel begged, said it wasn't what it looked like, that Hayes had pressured her. But Hayes didn't de-escalate. He threatened James, said he'd never see freedom, that no one would believe his story. Something shifted in James's mind. He realized no matter what happened now, his life was over. Rachel screamed. The first shot hit Hayes in the chest. He fell backward. Rachel screamed louder. James turned toward her. He said he didn't remember deciding to shoot her. One moment screaming, the next silence and blood. He stood there, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 5 minutes. Set the gun down, walked to the hallway, sat against the wall to wait. Hayes died instantly from the chest shot. Rachel bled out over several minutes. James confessed immediately, but Detective Sarah Chen knew the who was just the beginning. Forensics found Hayes had accessed James's file obsessively in recent weeks. Rachel's fingerprints were everywhere in that office, suggesting she'd spent far more time there than a few parole meetings would explain. In Rachel's car, investigators found emails between her and Hayes going back 8 months. Started professional, became personal. By month 6, phrases like, "can't stop thinking about last night." The final email, 3 days before the shooting, Hayes wrote, "After the parole hearing, when he's out, we can figure this out. I care about you too much to let you go." Rachel responded, "The guilt is killing me. Maybe we should stop before it's too late." This transformed the case. Was Hayes using his position to manipulate Rachel, holding James's freedom hostage? Had Rachel been coerced? Did James know beforehand and plan this? Then complications emerged. Another inmate, Raymond Clark, claimed he'd overheard James threatening to kill the warden 3 weeks earlier. But Clark had credibility issues, a history of trading information for privileges. Prison surveillance footage surfaced, showing Rachel entering the building at 9:45 p.m., Hayes arriving at 10:05, then critically, Hayes on his office phone at 10:55, 5 minutes before James arrived. A corrections officer, Maria Santos, came forward. She'd heard Rachel say, "You promised this was the last time," and Hayes responding, "Trust me, everything will work out." 20 minutes later, she heard Hayes on the phone. "Bring him over in 10 minutes, I'll handle it." Why did Hayes specifically request James at that exact time? The biggest revelation came from Hayes's locked desk drawer, a handwritten note. "I know what you're doing with Mitchell's wife. If you don't want this getting out, do exactly what I tell you." Someone had been blackmailing Hayes. Phone records showed Hayes received calls from an untraceable burner phone in the days before the shooting. Someone orchestrated this confrontation, wanted James to catch them, wanted violence. James's trial began 6 months later. Prosecution argued cold-blooded murder because he couldn't handle his wife moving on. Defense attorney Michael Torres presented a different story. He showed emails proving Hayes used his parole influence as leverage for the affair. A psychologist testified Rachel's situation was textbook coercion, a vulnerable woman manipulated by an authority figure holding her husband's freedom hostage. Then Torres revealed who orchestrated everything. Raymond Clark, the inmate who claimed James threatened Hayes, had been denied parole 6 months earlier because of a scathing report from Hayes. Clark swore revenge. Derek Simmons, Officer Simmons's brother with gang connections, had visited Clark multiple times before the shooting. Derek's daughter had been assaulted by an inmate at Crosswater 3 years earlier. She never recovered, attempted suicide twice. Derek blamed Hayes for inadequate security. An anonymous package arrived at a journalist's office containing the burner phone used to blackmail Hayes. Text messages between Derek and Clark detailed the plan: discover the affair, blackmail Hayes into arranging a confrontation, destroy Hayes's legacy and James's life in one move. Derek had expected scandal, not deaths. Maria Santos testified that after the shooting, Derek threatened her to stay quiet about what she'd heard. The connections were clear. Derek Simmons was arrested in Montana 3 months later, confessed. He'd been consumed by rage over his daughter, spent 3 years planning revenge. The affair seemed like the perfect opportunity. He said he hadn't expected them to die. The judge reduced James's sentence based on manipulation evidence, not freedom, but hope. James was transferred to another facility. His mother visited monthly. 2 years later, Derek Simmons was sentenced to 25 years. James's case was reopened with new evidence showing he'd been deliberately manipulated. His sentence was reduced to time served plus 5 years, making him eligible for parole in 3. During those years, James started talking to a counselor about guilt, grief, and anger. About Rachel, how he still dreamed about her despite everything. About replaying that moment 10,000 times, looking for where he could have chosen differently. The counselor said trauma doesn't work that way, that his reaction was tragically human. At the parole hearing, Rachel's mother, Patricia, spoke. She said she'd spent 5 years hating James, wishing him dead. But after reading Rachel's journal and following Derek's case, she understood her daughter's death wasn't just about one man's rage. It was about a system that failed everyone, about people using Rachel and James as pawns. She didn't forgive James, didn't think she ever could, but she understood. She thought Rachel would have wanted James to have a chance. The parole board released James with conditions: anger management, steady employment, no contact with anyone involved. At 43, James walked out of prison. His mother drove him home to Pittsburgh. He got a job at a nonprofit helping formerly incarcerated people. Lived simply, kept to himself. On the anniversary of Rachel's death, he visited her grave with flowers, even though her family asked him not to. He never remarried, told his counselor he didn't trust himself with intimacy anymore. Derek's daughter wrote James a letter saying she'd been horrified learning what her father did, that she never wanted anyone to die. She was sorry for all of it, for the ripple effects of violence and trauma. James read it several times, crying. He never responded, but kept the letter in his wallet as a reminder that everyone was broken by this story in different ways. Here's what we learned. Betrayal isn't always simple. Sometimes the person betraying you is being manipulated. Victims can be victimizers. There are rarely clear heroes and villains in real tragedy. Institutions designed to protect can become places where power is abused, where one person's vendetta destroys multiple lives. In that split second when James walked into that office and his world shattered, he faced a choice nobody should make. We can debate whether he made the right choice, whether he should have walked away. But none of us really know what we'd do in that moment when everything we believed was suddenly revealed as false. Think about it. Imagine you're James, 8 years in a cell holding on to one thing. Now imagine seeing that promise broken in the most devastating way. How would you react? Would you walk away, or would something primal take over? I'm not asking you to condone what James did. I'm asking you to understand how a person gets to that point. What about Rachel? Was she a victim coerced by a man holding her husband's freedom hostage, or a woman who made her own choices and tried to justify them? Can she be both? These questions make this case so haunting. Every person involved thought their choices were justified. James defending his dignity, Rachel helping her husband, Hayes finding companionship, Clark getting revenge, Derek avenging his daughter. Every choice led to death, destruction, lives ruined. That's the real lesson. Our choices ripple outward in ways we can't predict. What seems justified can have consequences we never imagined. So, what do you believe happened that night? Was James a victim manipulated into violence, or a man who let anger control him? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. Do you think justice was served? Did James deserve the sentence reduction? If you were on that jury, how would you have voted? There's no right answer, and that's what makes this compelling. If this story affected you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who appreciates real stories about impossible situations. Subscribe because we're bringing you more cases without easy answers, ones that make you question everything about right and wrong. Coming up next, a woman who vanished on her wedding day, a groom who became the prime suspect, and a secret 3 people took to their graves. Sometimes the darkest betrayals aren't the ones we see coming. They're built slowly by people who think they're doing the right thing. James Mitchell learned that the hard way. What can we learn from his story? If you made it to the end, comment, "Justice is complicated," and tell me where you're watching from. See you in the next one.